Hi everyone, it's Charlie Webster here. Thanks so much for joining us for My Sporting Mind. We're proudly supported by sportinglife.com, providing sporting opinion, debate and analysis for over 160 years. And today I'm really chuffed to welcome the fastest Paralympian in the world, 5-time Paralympic gold medalist, the incredible sprinter that is Jason Smyth, to the podcast. Welcome, Jason. Everybody gets a clap. How's things been at the moment, given that it's constantly chopping and changing and you're working towards a massive goal in your life?
I think, it's obviously not just within sport, but everybody's been massively impacted in some way. So for me specifically, just the things actually you just didn't have to think about or deal with. You could focus on what your preparation is, when you're training, where you're going on training camps, different days you're doing certain things. If you want to book in to go to the gym or the physio, everything was kind of, I suppose, a little bit more give and take and a bit of flexibility. Now everything's just completely changed. That throws huge challenges when you're trying to prepare for games, and like when we look at a year and what you've planned, I know where I want to be this month, which then leads to where I want to be next month, which leads to where, and that just follows in all the way to the games. But now you've just got this ability for things to be thrown in that can just change everything. And then how do you adjust to that and still be where you want to be? So not only you've got to figure out about how you get things right, you've got to be, I suppose, be able to somewhat move and be agile as things that you don't usually have to deal with can be thrown straight across in front of you.
How have you been adapting mentally then to get your head around that? Because I can imagine you have to an extent, given that you're going to be competing hopefully in Tokyo.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what you've got to continue to keep your focus on is what that goal is. And again, I don't know, is it for me the fact that I am more experienced? I mean, this is me going to my 4th Paralympic Games.
Yeah.
So you tend to be able to deal with things better because you've been there and done it, and you kind of know what works and doesn't work. And I mean, you not have necessarily experienced what we're experiencing now, but you've experienced the ups and downs of that whole journey. So I think for me anyway, it allows you to be, I'm actually pretty chilled and laid back as a person anyway, so it allows you to deal with what comes your way. And I mean, the thing I find with everything, there's always an answer, there's always a solution. So it's about trying to find what that is, and if you're focused enough on what you want to achieve, then I think you'll always try, or I always find a solution to work around it. Or I think sometimes the other interesting thing is because of this whole situation, it's actually made you think about things differently.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, I suppose, probably a lot of para athletes and when you think of disabilities and having to overcome disabilities to be successful or achieve, you've got to think about doing things differently. There's never one right answer. And I suppose within all this is, what is the opportunity? And that's for me one of the things I always try to look for. What is the opportunity in what comes my way? I've been able to reflect on, for example, how I may change things into the lead up to Tokyo this year, where I wouldn't have necessarily reflected on if things just had went smoothly. I've had made some changes around just what I'm doing around my program that have all kind of come off the back of I suppose this last 9 months to a year. So as I say, I think it's not always easy to look in that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's when you look back, you can actually realize being forced in a different direction can sometimes be somewhat of a blessing in disguise that you don't I suppose, appreciate till time passes.
And you've mentioned about disabilities and overcoming things. You've had to overcome a lot and to be where you are. Just to give a bit of background, you got Stargardt disease, which is a degenerative disease when you were 8 years old, which caused visual impairment, which was why you compete in the Paralympic Games. What was that like for you growing up, and how did you deal with that adversity and the challenges that presented?
Yeah, so my eye condition, basically to describe it, so the central vision for me is completely blind, and I would then use the peripheral vision to see. So the central vision is pretty much what you see everything clearly with. So in a rough percentage, I have about 5 to 10% vision. And nearly a way I always find to describe it is like if somebody takes a photo that's very blurry, you don't necessarily see the detail, but you can see colors and maybe outlines of shapes depending on color. So for me, I would, start to pick things up because of the color contrast, and I may see something over there that's a black rectangle, and that becomes an educated guess that that's a TV, so the detail pretty much completely goes. So for me, I was diagnosed at the age of 8. Honestly, don't really remember much before that, and more mum and dad started to realize, I had to start coming closer to things. When I look straight at something, I was often looking past it, and then obviously went and tests and diagnosed with the eye condition. But dealing with it at that age, I think it was probably, to be fair, my parents who found it the most difficult, and that's because you're so young.
Yeah.
But I think as time goes on, you realize a little bit more. And I think when I look back to, that was some of the things that my mum found most difficult, is like when, in these instances, when you're diagnosed with, the eye condition, and there's always the possibility you could go completely blind. So there's uncertainty about it, but it's always talked about what the things you are not going to be able to do. And you always, hear the things that are going to be so much more difficult. And it nearly just makes things seem maybe less pleasant, or just, there's less things to look forward to. And obviously, that's proven not to be the case, but I think through a lot of that time, especially as a teenager, and trying to fit in and trying to be normal, I think that for me was probably the tougher times, and a lot of it really comes down to is accepting. I think that's probably the biggest lesson, in my experience of it, is accepting who you are and where you're at. And the moment you can do that is the moment you can move on. And for me, sport and getting involved in para sport was the start of that process of accepting who I am, and then leading to being confident in myself and secure and stable in myself.
Did it help you celebrate and shine a light on who you are, rather than almost that stigma that sometimes comes, and shouldn't, but does sometimes come with disability?
Yeah, getting involved in sport, shine that light, is that what you're meaning? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I found quite difficult, is this. So I was always involved in sport because I was fast and I could get away with being pretty decent at most sports just because it was quick. But it was then my coach, I was involved in athletics for about a year, and then my coach mentioned to me about the Paralympics, and I kind of had this battle with myself, is, do I want to really be involved? Because at those ages, I think it might have been about 16, that was what I was trying to hide. That was not what I was wanting to shine a light on.
Yeah, and then it was like, show it to the world.
Yeah. So it was this battle, do I want to, or I don't really know if I do want to. As you're saying, you know, you're shining a light on everything you want to hide. And I can't tell you what exactly made me go down that line of get involved. And back then parasport was very different than it is nowadays as well. Like obviously since 2012 there's been a huge profile, and a lot of light has been put into the Paralympics, where, you know, before that it was, you know, I even found myself, people would get it confused with the Special Olympics and the Paralympics, and I was, you know, don't want to be having my friends think I'm in the Special Olympics, you know. So there was that whole challenge of deciding to do it, but obviously now in reflection, that was the right decision to be made. I mean, it was, as we said, it was what allowed me to start that process to accept who I am. And with the success in sport, then that kind of built and gave me confidence in who I am and what I can achieve regardless of the situation I'm in.
Did you want to compete and go into, excuse the word, but as mainstream or able-bodied competition? Because I know that I remember I was involved in the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games, and I remember I was there when you won in 2012, but I also remember that you actually went to be part of the Olympic Games as well. Is that something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I ran like 400ths, 0.04 of a second away from the A standard at London 2012. So it was incredibly close, too close, actually worse being close than it is
I can imagine
being further away. So
was that frustrating?
Yeah, it was. And to be honest, I was in the shape to do it. That's probably the most frustrating thing. So I was based out in the States, training with some of the top Olympic athletes. And the funny thing is I think my first race, I ran 10:24 for the 100 meters, and the standard was 10:18. So usually you don't run your fastest race. Your first race, you usually kind of drop down a little bit. So I knew I was in shape to do it. The thing, obviously, in hindsight, and what you learn is the more I wanted it to happen and the more I tried to force it to happen, the less and less it actually materialized. I would do more mistakes, I would tighten up, and I would end up running slower. So in one way, yes, it was extremely frustrating. But another way, I think it's funny sometimes, is those moments are the moments that allow you to learn and improve or make changes. Because when things are going well, you tend to not look at things like that. But when things don't go well, you kind of, I suppose you also learn a lot about who you are and how you deal with the challenges you face.
And how did you deal with that time? How did you reframe your head and go, that's okay, I'm going to compete in the Paralympic Games?
Yeah, I think for me, probably a number of different things. My goal was always to try and make the Olympics and win at the Paralympics. So that goal was always there. So I never really lost sight of that. So that kept me focused on one of the things I wanted to do. I think the other thing that I was fortunate enough to have was good people around me. And I think that's probably one of the very important thing, especially when things don't go the way maybe you want. I had my coach at the time, even just my family as well. So the people that were around me were able to keep me on the path. Not that I was going off the path, but keep you focused more on what you're trying to do. Because sometimes when you're so involved in it too, it's hard to step back and have that bigger perspective of what that that whole journey is about, and what's the lessons to be learned. So I think they're probably the things that kind of helped me along at that time.
You mentioned that you trained in the States, and I know you trained with Tyson Gay, obviously US sprinter.
Yeah.
What was the most important thing did you learn from that time and from the way they trained? Because I know you said that gave you a lot of confidence in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we initially went out to the States, and I mean, that was really just on this idea, if you want to be the best at something, then, you know, logic tells you to try be around the best, and that's how you learn and hopefully improve. So for me, I think one of the big things I realized, well, probably a few things, is their attention to detail to what they were doing. Just was above anything I had seen. But the other thing is, what I realized is, after a while of being in beside some of these guys and you know, running beside them and whatever the sessions, I realized that I'm actually not that far away. And before, when you maybe see people that have run a lot faster than you, you maybe see them on TV or whatever, you see them being significantly far away. And when it comes to a race, they can be far away, but you also realize from being in there day in, day out, and if you can, you know, train and work hard, that you're not, the gap isn't as big as you might think. And with that, for me, I became more confident in, you know, if I can train with these guys and not be that far away, well, that puts me in a very good place. That puts me, when I go to race, I'm going to be consistent. I know I'm going to be at a certain level. So that was probably one of the big things. Just the other thing is the environment. And again, not necessarily just related to sport, but anything, the environment you find yourself in is what's often going to allow you to excel or not. You know, if you're in the right environment, then the opportunities are there to, I suppose, go towards your potential. If you're not in that environment, you just ain't going to get there. And I think that's probably one of the things I've seen when I've been in that environment to compare to also when I'm home and around other athletes. Until you've been there and seen it, you just don't understand or realize. You know, it's nearly a bit of how do you explain to somebody that hasn't been there what it's about and what you can benefit from it, other than being there and trying to mix it up and improve yourself.
Because I think when it comes to 100 meters or Paralympics or Olympics in itself, you know, we see you every 4 years, but we don't see every single day. And especially with 100 meters, we see you for like 10 seconds.
The less, the better.
and you don't see that, you know, you said attention to detail, the everyday, you know, what's the mentality like and the mindset to do that every single day to work? I know you have like world championships and things like that in between, but I'm talking in that cycle.
Yeah, it's like, I know I've spoken to other people and I've said something similar around like the Paralympics or Olympics comes every 4 years, and it's a 10-second race, and it is over 5,000 hours of training to try get and win a 10-second race. And that's, when you start looking at those numbers, you know, that's incredible to think of the amount of hours that has to be put in for such a small bit of time. And within that small bit of time, there's no room for error. You know, hundredths of seconds, tenths of seconds are the difference between people making finals, not between winning medals and not. And then how do you on that day get things right when you need to get things right? But for me, I think the most important thing around being prepared and getting your mind right, or the mentality side of it, is I think, as I kind of said earlier, you've got to know what you're trying to achieve. So I suppose it really comes down to goals, what you're wanting to achieve, but then how you're going to get there. So like for me, I work on 4-week training blocks. So as I kind of touched on a little earlier, is if I know where I need to be now, then that sets me up for where I need to be in the next month and the next month. So even though you know where you want to be by the end of the year or the end of the cycle, you're also focused on where you need to be now rather than looking too far down the line. So that continues to allow you to focus on where you need to be right this second, that gets you to where you need to be. I think if you don't know that, and things aren't kind of one step on the next, then it becomes very difficult because you don't really have a direction and where you're going, and you don't really have something to fall back on. And even when you look back, is another thing, is when you look at training and where I was last month and the notes I'd taken, it's also good to look back and see where you were, and what things you learned, or what things from last year that I didn't do that I could have done that I can then change this year. So you kind of just have to be so aware of where you've been and where you are and where you're going. And a bit back to what I said, the attention to detail of that and knowing that. Not just kind of floating along and, people see it and think, just run a little bit faster. It's just not that simple at all.
I like the thing you're saying about looking back, because that's something that's been really important for me. I think that's helped me improve in various aspects of my life, is looking back at things, which I think sometimes we find hard to do.
Yeah.
Rather than looking forward. Now, something I wanted to ask you, because I basically I was looking through your race results. I used to do athletics as a junior, and I was like looking at all your different results, and I counted 20 gold medals, which is incredible, by the way, I'm sure you know. An incredible amount of consistency over that period of time. So what is it that keeps you going and your drive? Because, well, you kind of haven't lost at all. It's just a really interesting, because a lot of people's drive is because they haven't quite got that gold medal, or they haven't made it, or they lost in that final. And whereas you've won everything consistently as well, which I think is really important over a period of time.
Yeah, like it's definitely one of the things you hear a lot in sport is, it's never easy winning, but it's easier to win the first time than it is to keep winning. And it's, it is, how do you be consistent? And I think, like, if I'm honest, when you look at that whole journey, there is ups and downs. So, you're never at a complete high in motivation. I think for me, just as kind of on a background to it, as a personality, I am extremely consistent. I'm not a person that has highs, and I'm not a person that have lows. Right. And therefore I think that also reflects on the consistency I have in what I'm doing. But the thing is, like, you've got to find what motivates you. And for me, when I look back at different times, what motivates me changes. And the more you kind of, I suppose, get or understand what motivates you, then it's easier to keep motivated. And as I say, that changes, and it has to change, because what motivates you 8 years ago isn't what motivates you now. Yeah. And if you always want it to be the same thing, then you're never going to be able to maintain. So I think I've been good at finding what motivates me, and motivating me hasn't always been, and actually often isn't, about the medal. which I know it's maybe sounds a wee bit strange, but it's more about me being the best I can be, or reaching my potential. Because if I mean, maybe it was to start with, was about winning medals, but if you're constantly focused or the motivation is medals, well, it kind of I don't mean it in a bad way, but it kind of gets a bit old. It doesn't have the same, wow factor or the same excitement. But for me, it's about how can I be the best I can be. And even think of now, it's about how can I do things that possibly nobody will ever do again, or very few people will ever do again. And obviously that comes with trying to continue to win gold medals, but the gold medal isn't the thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
So yeah, for me, I mean, you can look at the structure on how you want to be successful in whatever sport you're going to be doing, and the principles for sport or work or whatever, the principles of success are fundamentally the same kind of thing. It's just the drive to get you there. And yeah, I still feel like I still feel like I am as motivated. I actually feel like I'm more motivated now than maybe I was 10 years ago, which I mean sometimes maybe seems a bit strange considering in para terms I've won everything that I really is there to win.
So what is the motivation now then? Are you looking at times, breaking records, because you said doing things that other people might not be able to do in this lifetime?
I mean, I think times, I mean, I look at times and I have times I want to hit, but times are a result of what you do. So if I'm in a good, if I get my preparations right, then times will come. So I tend to not look at times, but knowing if I get my preparation right, that the times look after themselves. But for me, it is about doing things that people are, some athletes may do it, but very, very few will be able to be as consistent as long as I have. And I think it's that now at that stage, it's that longevity of that success is the motivation to keep going. How long can my first international European Paralympic Championships was in 2005. So I mean that's already over 15 years, which is quite a while. How much longer can I be consistent at that very top level is my motivation. Is how long can I stretch this out to potentially do something that very few people will ever do. And I mean, this is sport. Tomorrow, that next week or this year, that could change. But I'm always going to put myself in the position that I'm best prepared, and when it changes or if it changes, then you accept that you've done everything you could, and that's really all you can do.
Can you describe to us what it's like at the start of a race and what you hone in on? Do you kind of like listen to certain sounds?
Like as in you're literally about to start?
Yeah. When you kind of have maybe about to take the blocks or.
Yeah, it's that whole, I mean, even going back a little bit before it, it's a pretty incredible experience. When you think of like going out into the stadium and thousands of people and the noise and the atmosphere and that kind of hair standing up on the back of the neck, this was just the adrenaline as you go out and you just supposed to be part of this atmosphere and environment, and then all of a sudden, it could be a number of minutes later, you're sitting behind the blocks and the whole place just goes quiet. You hear absolutely nothing. And in one instance, before you're somewhat taken in the environment, enjoy it, all of a sudden you go from kind of everything outside you to turning everything inside. And obviously, if you're in the start position, you're thinking of absolutely nothing other than that first noise of the gum, that you react and attack out of the blocks. And even in those moments, like competing, half the time I can't tell you what happened. You know, all of a sudden, I mean, it's a 10-second race, yeah, but I mean, you know, you're halfway down the track before you even have time to think.
Yeah.
And by the time you think about doing something, you've already gone another 10 meters. So what you maybe think about, it's too late to change. And that's where a lot of the training comes in, is about the routine, that it just happens and flows. But even like those moments, you know, you run the race, the noise could be incredible. You hear absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden you cross the line and you hear everything again. You know, it's incredible. And that's also one of the things, when you ask me like what motivates me, is I think earlier in your career, you take a lot of this for granted. At this stage, I realize how incredible it is. And I realize in a number of years, it's going to be all over, and I'm never going to experience anything like it. So it's important to enjoy it and make the most of it while you have it.
And hold on to those moments.
Yeah.
And what can you, because you compete in T13.
Yep.
So what can you, which basically means that you don't run with a guide. So
Yep.
what can you see when you're running down that track, down that 100-meter straight?
Yeah. So again, as I said, T13 is roughly about 5 to 10% vision. So for me, again, like what I was describing earlier, I could see colors. So like an orange track and white lines, I could see the color contrast and know where those lines are. Getting to the finish line, generally you wouldn't see it till I'm there. But I know I've shared an experience too before at it was actually London 2012 in the heats. And again, I'm sure most people are aware, but if you see the 100 meters, you always see there's the camera that shoots up the side of the track.
Yeah, follows you.
Yeah. So I remember it was just the heats, and again, because I've just got blurry vision, I could just see something, just seen a dark color, a black color sitting at pretty close to in line with me out on my right. And I was thinking, who's that? Who is that? And no matter what, it just kept going at the same speed. So even if I went a wee bit slower, a wee bit faster, it would just be sitting there at that same
Did you think
speed.
it was another person?
Yeah, and it wasn't until after that then I realized it was actually the camera just going up alongside. So there's just a little funny story about what you see going up and down or going up the track. So yeah.
That's quite funny. I wonder if it like spurred you on because you thought it was somebody.
I was hoping to run slower in the heats, but I had to keep going.
And what, because I can imagine, I mean, you've touched on it a little bit, self-belief. I can imagine that's so incredibly important for you and what you do. Is there any advice you could give around believing in yourself or the journey you've taken with that?
I think like a lot, it's one of those things that I find so difficult. Like you get asked about it, how do you explain it, or how do you help somebody else have more self-belief? And I think my experience and a lot of the success I've had has given me that self-belief. And I know I said some of the other lessons I've learned, but if you were to ask me, the most important thing that I've learned throughout all of this would be exactly that, is to believe in myself. And I think just the natural instinct for everybody is to doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And to doubt what you can achieve. And, you know, I can't do that because of this, and I can't do that. And for me, I suppose looking at what I can achieve has allowed me to be more open-minded and put less barriers up to what I'm trying to achieve. And I mean, I don't know if I've any specific lessons, but I just think for anybody is about trying to believe in yourself and your abilities. I mean, we all have talents, we all have abilities. Somebody's maybe in sport that you see, somebody's maybe something that you don't see, but everybody has things that they are incredible at. And believing in that, and not doubting in that, for me, has helped me to be open-minded, not just in sport, but when I'm out of sport. I believe I can be successful whatever I want to be, regardless of that. And it really comes down to the perspective of what way you're looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
That saying, is the glass half full or half empty? And I think, the only thing to really do is to be aware of yourself, and aware of when you doubt things, to say, actually stop doubting things, believing in what I can achieve. And I just find it's incredible that when you believe in what you can do and you're willing to do whatever you need to do to make it happen, that things just seem to be able to, just seem to align a lot better to when you have that mindset and that ability to try and make it happen.
Because I think it completely influences your behavior.
Yeah,
So things just align, and I think it's often because you might make a different decision if you see the glass as half full rather than half empty, or if you actually say, no, I can do that. It might mean that you go up to be a Paralympian, but you might not if you say, no, no, I can't do that, or I'm not good enough. In terms of disabilities, I mean, I know it's difficult to say, what advice would you give? But what would you say to people? I know you've done some inspiring talks before, people that have got different disabilities or challenges.
Yeah, like I'm always asked about just obviously the very obvious connection to disabilities, but I mean, when I always step back, I mean, disability is a challenge, and it doesn't matter if you've got a physical disability that you see. Everybody experiences challenges.
Yeah.
And life's really about how you overcome them, really. And no matter how many times you overcome one or two or three, there's going to be a few more sitting, waiting ahead. But the two things I would say, and one would be what I've already touched on, is believing in yourself. And the second thing I've actually found, and again, there's a bit of the change in perspective, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is I actually found, in my experience of all the challenges I face, that they are the moments that allow me to grow. They're the moments that allow me to improve. They're the moments that allow me to change for the better, and become whatever I need to be. So without those challenges, you could never, I suppose, become that better version of you. So in fact, always looking at challenges as a downside, I nearly flip it around and say, then the more challenges I experience, the better I can become, the stronger I can become, because the ability to overcome them, there's lessons to be learned and strength to be gained, and rather than the flip side.
I think that's a really nice way to look at things. And when you're in those, because I think it's good to have perspective, because sometimes when you're in the moment, you did say it a bit earlier on, you can almost get that tunnel vision, can't you, of frustration or like overwhelming emotions. What do you do in those moments when in those low times?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is difficult. It's easy sometimes to sit here in hindsight and say, do A, B, C, but in those moments, how do you make those right decisions? And there's not, I don't know if there's one right or easy answer. And to every person it's different. But I think for me, the more I, let's say, have good principles around what I'm trying to do, good structures around what I'm trying to do, then when things get difficult or tough, then I feel I'm more likely to make the right decisions. So if I live on a daily basis in the way I want to perform at the best in what I do at sport, if I follow those, those underlying principles, then that's the way I live my life. That's the way I live my life on the track. That's the way I live my life off the track. And when it comes to those difficult moments, you go sometimes into autopilot a bit. And I think kind of what I talked about in racing is, no matter what if you've done it in training, it's about going into race, and it's just what happens. It's what your norm is. And I find for me, if that's the way I think and operate on good times, then that's more likely to be my norm or my reaction in bad times. And combine that again with you always need good people around you to just, I suppose, keep that perspective sometimes, or sometimes bring you down to earth, that are just honest. That's one of the things I quite like about is people that are around me is honesty. I mean, I like to hear it black and white how it is. I don't, I like to know the facts and keep it real. And therefore, if you kind of are real in the way you're thinking and what you're told, then it's easier to be real in how you deal with it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I'm quite a black and white person. I like to know what's going on. Otherwise, I find it, I don't know. I find kind of the chatter difficult otherwise. And I just like to know. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fabulous talking to you. Sending you best of luck, and I hope that you get on your training camp and the training camp goes well.
Thank you.
It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you, and we hope you've enjoyed listening. There's so much more for you to enjoy as well. Check out the other episodes. Give us a subscribe and a like if you like us, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. And remember to visit sportinglife.com ahead of the rest with 160 years of sporting knowledge and integrity. Thanks again for listening. Take care, and we'll speak again soon. And very, very big thanks, if that makes sense. Very big thanks. Yep, very big thanks to Jason. Thank you very much.